George Masvidal, Mike Perry, this was Perry's idea, and Masvidal hasn't responded. And that is not like Masvidal. I mean, there is nowhere within history that somebody has called out George Masvidal publicly and not gotten a response. But he hasn't responded. Now, there's reasons George doesn't need to respond to Perry, starting with the fact that he's retired. Well, okay, I hear that, but before you say that, there was nothing about George's retirement that was sincere. Nothing. He didn't mean it when he said it. He might as well have been the kid that comes out with his fingers crossed. It sounded insincere, and it wasn't even 2 weeks later that he was doing interviews talking about fighting again. George had his own promotion. So when he began speaking about that, many of us thought, well, it's not a matter that he's going to go and headline one of his own events. He's just going to bring attention to his event. But he ended up not doing that. He actually never bridged. He never married those two ideas together. Which lends to the idea of the sincerity that Masvidal would like to fight again. And I do believe understood his time in the octagon was past. But that wasn't his true love. He loved you guys. He loved the experience, the opportunities, and the money. But his true love is stand-up fighting. So when Perry called him out, there was just so many things that worked. There was so many things that made sense. Dave Feldman's got a whole pile of money waiting over there for George Masvidal. I don't know on a personal note where George is at with his contract within the UFC. Now, that's a situation where one phone call and he would get a release. But just so you understand, when you see people retire, that doesn't mean that they're just free. And this got tested one time that you'll remember, which was St. Pierre versus Oscar De La Hoya. And it was years after George had retired, but he still had an active contract, and Dana would have liked to have used him. Hey, George, you want to fight, man? No problem. Let me get you one. Well, I want to fight, but I don't want to fight there. I want to go box Oscar. And it was just one of those spots, right? Oscar's putting Dana down. Why is Dana going to do a favor? It's one of these situations. And I only bring it to you so that you do understand when a guy says I'm retired, right? It's not any different than Michael Scott walking out and declaring bankruptcy by yelling to his coworkers, I declare bankruptcy. Like, there's steps involved. So if that were holding up George and he wanted that to be an excuse, great, he could use it, but he hasn't. And if it was a reality to the situation, he could make one phone call and that would get cleared. And I don't have an overarching point here aside from the fact that I've never seen Masvidal called out and Masvidal not respond. Now, there could also be a change of heart when I tell you that his retirement was very insincere. It was. When I tell you he had his fingers crossed, he did. But you have the right to change your mind. So he might have been talking, he might have been in the gym, he might have been staying busy, he's still going to the events, he was still bit by the bug, he still had the eye of the tiger, and then pretty soon changed his mind. And he is just truly done. That could also be a very reasonable answer, and that would make sense as to why he just let it go. Perry did not disrespect him. There wasn't an issue there where his ego was being damaged. In fact, Perry put him over. Perry said, when I was in high school, I was watching this bare knuckle fighter who was going backyards in Florida on YouTube named George Masvidal. He put him over. So I'm not calling George out for this. I'm just mentioning that I would like him to respond. And that could be yes, no, maybe. That could be best of luck, I'm retired. There's a number of things that he could do that would not damage the brand and or the ego. You're getting this from a narcissist. Like, I understand the drive and what you will do to preserve that identity and or that ego. It's not called into question here. But when you do start to think about fantasy fights for Mike Perry, who's the face of an organization that performs on pay-per-view in front of sold-out arenas. Like, there's nothing about that is an insult. Not to mention, Feldman has a jackpot full. He's not going to call an insult Masvidal. He's going to call and tell him one time what the number is, but there'll be nothing about that number where you go, come on, this isn't serious. George Masvidal himself, with the show that he puts on, is very generous. Very generous. Feldman will give George 3 times what George has ever paid anybody. I'm just bringing it to you. It's one of these unique spots. Like, the rules within bare knuckle, for some people, is going to turn them away. You wouldn't even call St. Pierre and ask him to do bare knuckle. You wouldn't even ask him about it. But Masvidal's event does bare knuckle. So it's not as though he's going to say anything about the rules. And then when it comes to the pay, Masvidal takes very, very good care of those guys. Feldman will do that times 3. So all of a sudden, you couldn't argue with the number. The rules are, right? It's like throwing Brer Rabbit in the briar patch. This is where Masvidal was born and raised, so the rules aren't a problem. The weight class, Perry just fought at 175. Masvidal fights at 170 and has a hard time making it. I mean, as you go down the list, everything is there, unless George is in fact retired and those crossed fingers are no longer crossed. I don't have the answer on that. I don't overly believe that there's a wrong answer, but I will admit for you, as I watched Perry do that call out, I wanted some kind of an answer from Masvidal.